Ambazonia, and welcome to tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Thabita Akar. Let's begin. For many families in Ambazonia, the struggle has grown far beyond the sound of gunfire. It is now woven into everyday life, hoping the lights stay on, that roads remain safe to travel, that hospitals can continue to function, and that the next emergency does not become another tragedy. Years of war have laid bare the fragility of public services. Aging electricity infrastructure, overstretched healthcare facilities, and persistent security concerns have become part of the daily reality for ordinary civilians in Ambazonia. Residents and civil society have repeatedly questioned whether enough is being done to protect and maintain the essential services on which communities depend. While French-Cameroon government claims the security situation has significantly hampered infrastructure development and service delivery, but is that a leverage? Now came another setback. Just after midnight, a devastating fire tore through a key administrative block at Bamenda Regional Hospital, destroying vital offices, critical records, medical support unit, and equipment. Although the cause of the blaze remains under investigation, its impact is already clear. Another essential institution has suffered a major disruption. In Ambazonia, where public infrastructure is already under immense strain. Now, for many residents, the fire is more than an isolated incident. It is another reminder of how fragile daily life has become, where every failure of a critical public service deepens the challenges facing ordinary civilians at home. Well, all this we'll explore tonight. Now let's head on to the prime headlines. Tonight, we took a look at nursing student allegedly stabbed to death in Kumba, boyfriend in police custody. Also tonight, motorcyclist killed after crashing into parked truck in Nkambe. Also tonight, to take a look at heavy rains in Bamenda bring down power poles, deepening concerns over aging infrastructure. And tonight, midnight fire got key administrative block at Bamenda Regional Hospital. And an African scene, growing xenophobia fuels anti-immigrant protests across South Africa. And across the globe, Venezuela's health system overwhelmed after deadly earthquakes. Who warns? Now we head on to the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. A nursing student from Biaka Nursing University in Boya has died after she was allegedly stabbed during an altercation with her boyfriend near Kumba Motor Park, police and local sources said. The victim, identified as Ayire Victory Finwe, was reportedly attacked on Friday, June 26th and sustained severe injuries. Despite efforts to save her, she later died from her wounds. Now, the incident has left residents of Kumba in shock. Finway, the daughter of a pastor with the Apostolic Church, was described by relatives as a quiet, dedicated, and hardworking student. The main suspect, identified as Pastor Clinton, allegedly attempted to take his own life after the incident by drinking bleach. He was rescued, received medical treatment, and was subsequently taken into police custody. Authorities are investigating the circumstances surrounding the incident. The suspect is expected to face prosecution if the allegations against him are substantiated. Well, tonight with me on the show, joining us now is Barrister Mbeshia, who always gives us his intensive input, his insights, his perspectives to the stories, really devastating stories sometimes on this show coming in from the home front. Barrister Mbeshia, good evening and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Barrister Mbeshia, a young life has been lost in what appears to be a case of intimate partner violence. And to put it straight, could you even imagine he's trying to take bleach? Just think about that. That's a little bit hilarious, I would say. Now, from a legal standpoint, Barrister Mbeshia, what does this case reveal about the growing trend of gender-based violence? And would say, looking at the figures of French Cameroon government, do you think justice will be effectively served? Looking that he's even a pastor, imagining a pastor doing that, Barrister Mbeshia.
No, I don't think this is one of the cases where we deal with as an Ambazonian only now. This is a social problem that every young guy, woman and boy, girl and boy should be careful. The background to these children is a pastor, and one would assume that they should have some morality in their behavior. And then the young lady who is dead, who is all the way in Boya, supposedly going to school, then she finds herself in Kumba, being stabbed to death. Would there be justice? I don't know, because what we hear and see right here might not be the whole story. The good thing about it is the young man is under custody. And if he's under custody, one would assume that everything being normal, I would face the wrath of the justice. But the bigger story to tell to our children, boys and girls alike, is to be very, very careful with the people we go out to date. It's never too late to date. It is too late to be prudent. So you have to be very, very prudent with the people we go out with. Because the story tells a different story. The niceties of it. A young lady and a young man stabbing in the street. That shows a degree of anger. We don't know what was the reason. But the young man is going out with a dagger and prepared to stab his or her friend, intimate friend, to death. That's unacceptable. We don't know why they did that. But again, as I've said, what was the girl doing in Kuma all the way from Boya? Being a university student, one would imagine that she had learned some sense. And so what I can say to our younger generation is that they should be very, very careful. The pastor, all what we hear is that they belong to a pastoral family. What else do we need more than that? To have people have good upbringing. Nothing short of that would have needed. If we were these children in the public university, we would be blaming them. To go to Biaka University is expensive. The family must have gone through a lot to look for money to send the child there. And so when children are sent out for that adventure, which is personal, you succeed in that school, you become a better person tomorrow. Boy and girl alike. And so it is for our children to be careful. It is for our parents to bring our children to be careful. Again, I've said, it's never too late to date. It might be too early to be not to be prudent. And so that's all I can say about it. This is not the case where we blame the Republic of Cameroon. There might be justice, there might not be justice. But the bottom line from the story is that the guy is under custody. And if he's under custody, that's a normal procedure. If somebody commits a crime, I've said it here, take the guy to court, let justice follow its course. We hope the same thing here. Over to you.
It's indeed a great loss, Barrister Mbeshia, and a sad story. But then let's see what is happening right in Nkambe. A young motorcyclist was killed on Monday night after his motorcycle collided with a heavy-duty truck parked along a commercial street in Nkambe. The crash occurred at about 9 o'clock p.m. when most businesses had closed and traffic was relatively light, according to witnesses. The rider, who was traveling alone and he's believed to have been returning home, died at the scene from injuries sustained in the collision. The incident drew scores of residents to the scene and renewed concerns over road safety in the town. Now, many residents cited the parking of heavy-duty trucks along busy streets as a major safety risk, particularly at night when visibility is reduced. Now, others called for greater adherence to road safety regulations, urging motorists and motorcyclists to exercise caution while traveling after dark. Now, authorities have not yet released an official statement on the crash, and the circumstances surrounding the incident remain under investigation. Now, Barrister Mbeshia, failure to keep safety rules has tragically led to the death of a promising young man. But then the question is, what happens to the French Cameroon's government road safety forces? Why would a truck be stationed in a major road and nothing was even done about that? Where are they?
Well, the answer is the same. Again, we blame these people all the time. We have to live with what we have until we become Amazonia. We've said many times before, there are no roads in Amazonia. And so when you say that it is parked at the corner of the road, it's parked somewhere, nowhere. There's not a road there. And so since that truck was parked, the principal blame, there are many blames to go by, but the principal blame should go to the bicycle bike rider. The fact that he died on the spot would suggest that he was running at a terrible speed. If it was a normal slow speed on a narrow road, he would probably have injuries. He would not have just died. And so our bike riders, our drivers have to live with the fact that we have no roads. We're riding on trucks. We're driving on footpaths. And so it is for you to be prudent for your own safety. We probably will charge the truck driver for parking wrongly, but was there even a space for them to park? You think he's dead somewhere on the road there? You are forced to park anywhere on the road. And so our driver, we should be very careful. You have to take care of your own life. While waiting for when Amazonia will come and build roads and parking spaces. They are not. And so for the next 10, 20 years until we get to Amazonia, we will have to live with that. And therefore, safety into your own house. Live with what you have. Be more prudent if you are a driver. Because it's not a head-on collision. It is the guy who drove into a standing truck. That is basically his own fault. Over to you.
Barrister Mbeshia, I would actually agree with you on that, because I believe our safety lies in our hands truly, and there's a lot we need to do with ensuring that we keep up with the road safety rules to ensure that our lives are being saved and even the lives of other persons. But Barrister Mbeshia, there is something else happening right in the heart of Bamenda. A heavy rainfall in Bamenda on Monday caused several deteriorating wooden electricity poles in the Mile 6 Mancon neighborhood to collapse, sending live wires crashing onto the road and triggering renewed alarm over the safety of the city's aging power infrastructure. Residents say the incident occurred during Bamenda's weekly Ghost Town observance, a period when businesses remain closed and streets are largely deserted due to the ongoing war. The reduced activity meant no injuries were reported, but locals say the outcome could have been far more serious on a normal business day when traffic and pedestrian movement are higher. According to witnesses, heavy rain and strong winds weakened several already worn-out poles, causing multiple structures to give way almost simultaneously. Falling poles blocked parts of the road and left exposed electrical cables hanging dangerously low, forcing residents to keep their distance until utility workers could intervene. "We worry every time the rains begins," said one resident of Mile 6 Mancon. "These poles have been weak for a long time. Today it happened here, tomorrow it could happen where children are walking or where cars are passing." Now, the collapse has intensified long-standing complaints about the condition of electricity infrastructure in Bamenda, where many wooden poles have reportedly been in use for decades despite visible signs of decay. Residents say repeated exposure to heavy rains during the rainy season continues to expose structural weaknesses in the distribution network. Power disruptions, are also a recurring challenge in the region, where outages frequently affect households and businesses. Now, many residents in Ambazonia say unreliable electricity supply has become a persistent hardship, compounded by infrastructure damage, conflict-related disruptions, and limited maintenance capacity. Now, local communities are urging the electricity distribution company to urgently replace the collapsed poles and conduct safety inspections on other vulnerable installations before further rainfall leads to additional failures. Concerns are particularly high as the rainy season intensifies across Ambazonia, increasing the risks of similar incidents. Now, authorities have not yet issued a detailed public statement on the latest collapse, but residents say they expect swift intervention to prevent further danger. Now, for many in Bamenda, the incident has become another reminder of the fragile state of essential services in a city where infrastructure, security, and daily life remain under daily constraint. Now, Barrister Mbeshia, when we talk about basic amenities, it's the barest minimum expected by a community. Now, in this report are two main structural challenges: electricity and infrastructure, and largely caused by the heavy rainfall. Now, and this happened in the wake of Monday Ghost Town. These reports exactly expose the realities faced by Amazonians in Bamenda. But then we see that the sad truth, this could have tragic effects on the lives of people, Barrister in Mbeshia, especially when maybe people are there. Thank God it was a Monday ghost town period, and so relatively everyone was home. So what's your take on this, Barrister in Mbeshia?
Well, we don't expect any statement from any authority. The story itself explains itself. A falling low, those are wooden poles. We've had the opportunity before to analyze it. Those poles span. If they can stand, they fall by themselves. You can imagine it been there for more than 30 years. The whole pole standing there, they're rotting, they fall by themselves. And so you go further to say, we have been analyzing here, everywhere in Ambazonia, low electricity, people are coming up in the streets asking for electricity, and they're not even having it. Can they have electricity under those circumstances? Certainly no. Those themselves are a danger. If you step on them, even the pole does not kill you, you step on that live cable, you will die. You will be shocked. And so what other thing can we say? That is rare evidence of non-governance. Call it Socatel, call it Sonara, call it any name. Nothing exists there in terms of infrastructure. What is the need? Cutting those pieces of wood and putting it on the road, putting live cables on them, and then no light is going through it. And then you reach yourself either driving in the street, stepping on live wires, or a pole falling on you, falling on your house, falling on your car. That is what we have gotten from this so-called unification with the people of Cameroon. Shall we ever get out of this? We must. A reasonable government, a reasonable organization will know that pole should have been changed. If there's no electricity there, that pole should be changed because the pole itself is a danger to the community. Nothing is being changed. People have been, this one's nobody died, but in other places people have died. People have died from electric shocks. Nobody has been held accountable. It happened in Limbe not too long ago. It has happened in Boya and other places. No, we have never heard that the so-called electricity companies or whatever you call it, for the death or for the loss of your property when electricity suddenly shuts off. And so again, this is evidence of no governance, no administration, and evidence of collective punishment. This is why we fight to get out of this nonsense. Because giving back in the 60s could happen in the days of power camp. No. If it happened in the days of power camp, they will feel the pinch. Power would. One, the general manager of that company will lose his job. But is anybody being held accountable for all this negligence, for all this default? No one is being held accountable. And so again, that reason why we must fight and fight until we restore ourselves. And then we'll pick the play they are left and we'll move on. For time, I must say that enough is enough. Over to you.
Sadly, in cases like this, nobody is being held accountable, Barrister Mbeshia. It's really a sad reality to see that infrastructure feels like a heavy duty for French Cameroon government to actually ensure that the people get to enjoy the necessary thing, the basic realities, the barest minimum every community would deserve from the government. But then Barrister Mbeshia, still in the heart of Bamenda, a devastating fire broke out in the early hours of the morning at Bamenda Regional Hospital, causing extensive damage to the hospital's multi-purpose center and several key administrative and service units. Undaunted News has gathered that the section initially reported as the hospital's library is in fact part of the multipurpose center, a vital complex that accommodates a number of essential offices and operational services. Now, an assessment of the scene revealed that the blaze completely destroyed the hospital's multipurpose conference hall, the office of the medical advisor, the general supervisor's office, the social action service, the medical statistics and ICT unit, the chaplaincy, the library, and the human resources office. Now, images captured right there on the screen after the fire show the scale of the destruction. The roof of the building was almost entirely consumed by the flames, while offices were left littered with charred furniture, burnt documents, destroyed electronic equipment, and heaps of debris. The affected offices were burnt beyond use, raising concerns about the disruption of critical administrative and support services within the hospital. Authorities have yet to determine the cause of the fire. As of the time of this report, officials had not confirmed whether there were any injuries or casualties. Emergency responders and hospital authorities are continuing to assess the full extent of the damage and the impact on the hospital's operations. Investigations are also expected to establish the origin of the fire, while hospital management is also anticipated to provide further details on recovery plans and measures to restore the affected services. Now, Undaunted News will continue to monitor development and provide update as more information becomes really available. Now, Barrister Mbeshia, let's hear from you. I mean, thinking about this, it's really devastating, I must say, happening in a hospital.
Well, once more, we move from one disaster to the street. Last fire, it's just office being raised down to the ground. What is the State Council will explain, that's where all files of criminals are recorded. That's where all prosecutions of criminals, including in their files, stocked in their computers. Today we're in Bamenda Hospital. The hospital is where live. All medical records are computers. Again, raised to the ground. As Mali and Bamenda are said last, there was a firefighter department in Mamfe will be the nearest one will be in Bamenda, about 200 miles away. But there's no, because today we are not in Bamenda, is raising down, he's not in the village, down the whole hospital. No firefighter trying to put out the fire. Fighting department trying to put out the fire. It's true. Fire is not new. Fire is common in the world. Most countries and most important cities have their firefighting departments because those things are predictable. See, why is there no firefighting department in Bamenda? At least an effective one. They can pretend to one, but it's not effective. If it were effective, why would the hospital go down in ashes without any rescue? There is no way. If there was one, the state department office, which is all, these are all located in the middle of town, burned down without questions asked. We don't know the cause of the fire, but what was the government, the administration is supposed to provide for, anticipate fire when they build their own, when they put up the structures. Because criminals can do it, accidents can cause it, anything can cause fire. The bottom line is that the government in place did not foresee, they did not contemplate. When they contemplated, they did not provide for firefighting if it does arise. And so again, it goes back to the absence of governance. Could we have joined these people for fire to burn? They come down, fire could take place in the village. In the village, it would have been different. Because the village would have all come out with their buckets of fire and try to water and try to do their. But this is the middle of town. And perhaps it looks like even a 2-floor building. How are they going to jump with their legs to put out the fire? Not humanly possible, not technically possible. And so again, that is where we find ourselves. That is the reason why we fight. And what are we fighting for? We are fighting to restore our institutions. We are fighting to restore our state. The state goes with all those things that we include there. The institutions that would restore would include firefighting, taking care of accidents, put up good roads to prevent the type of accident we just heard in the last segment. And so this is where we find ourselves, 50 years, 60 years into this so-called union. This is the reason why they fight. Even after keeping quiet for all those years, they decide to declare war on us, to eliminate the little that we have, and then go away without question us. Even if they were to rebuild that hospital ward, are they going to rebuild the computers? Are they going to recover your medical records which are found in ordinary files? They would not. That is the whole generation of human beings. Our medical records are important because when you move from one town to another, you move from Bamenda to Kumba, for example. If you are sick, they will request your medical records in Bamenda, and the doctor in Kumba will to follow up what they were doing in Bamenda. But everything has been burned down physically through the computer and through the ordinary files. What else is left of you health-wise? Zero. You are back to zero. You are starting from square one. This is why we should say no. We've said no. I will continue to say no until we get back to where we came from. And then again, as I said in the last segment, we start to rebuild our lives. Pick the pieces that are left. Move on. Because there comes a time in life. Move on. And you move on with the idea of improving on what you have left. Over to you.
First time, Mbeshia, these are the structural challenges we keep talking about that is associated with the French Cameroon's government. I mean, really critical questions we need to ask. Why wasn't the fire extinguishing service really swift to actually curtail the extent this went? But then it's still well, we would say it's still well, Barrister Mbeshia, and we keep pushing, we keep ensuring that the struggle still alive, very much alive. And definitely, as you have said, we'll really get there to Boya. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show, Barrister Mbeshia. Always a pleasure to have you. Well, this is where we'll let you go, so we'll head over to the rest of the news.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. South Africa is facing renewed tensions over immigration as anti-immigrant groups prepare for nationwide protests, prompting thousands of foreign nationals to either return to their home countries or seek temporary shelter amid fears of violence. Protest organizers have demanded that undocumented migrants leave the country ahead of demonstrations scheduled for today. While organizers insist the protests will remain peaceful, concerns persist due to South Africa's history of xenophobic violence targeting foreign nationals. Let's take a look. Now we'll see that the demonstrations are being driven by claims that undocumented migrants are taking jobs from South Africans, overburdening public services, and contributing to rising crime. However, available research and official data challenge many of these assertions. Recent opinion surveys indicate that anti-immigrant sentiment has grown significantly across the country. Findings from the Human Sciences Research Council show that only 1 in 6 South Africans now welcomes immigrants, while more than 4 in 10 respondents said they would not welcome any foreigners. Separate surveys by Afrobarometer and Ipsos also recorded widespread public support for tighter immigration controls and low levels of trust in African migrants. Now, despite these concerns, official statistics suggest South Africa's migrant population remains relatively small. According to statistics, South Africa, migrants accounted for approximately 3.1 million people, or 4.1% of the country's population in 2023, a decline from a decade earlier. The proportion is considerably lower than migration levels recorded in countries such as Britain, Canada, and Australia. Now, experts also dispute claims that migrants are responsible for South Africa's high crime rate. Justice Department figures previously showed that foreign nationals made up only about 6% of the country's prison population, with many detained for immigration-related offenses rather than violent crimes. Researchers argue that available evidence suggests migrants are generally less likely to commit crimes than is commonly perceived. Economic studies similarly challenge the belief that migrants deprive South Africans of employment. A World Bank report found that migrant workers often contribute to economic growth by creating businesses, generating demand for goods and services, and supporting additional local jobs. Claims that undocumented migrants are overwhelming hospitals and schools have also been questioned. Researchers say undocumented migrants are generally reluctant to use public services because registration requirement could expose their immigration status. They argue that South Africa's strained healthcare and education systems are largely the result of chronic underinvestment, poor governance, and corruption rather than immigration. Analysts say the resurgence of anti-immigrant sentiment is rooted in a combination of historical and economic factors. South Africa continues to grapple with one of the world's highest unemployment rates, widening inequality, and persistent failures in public service delivery. These pressures have created fertile ground for frustration, with migrants increasingly becoming convenient targets for public anger. Political observers also note that immigration often becomes a prominent campaign issue during election periods. With local government elections expected later this year, analysts warn that political rhetoric could further inflame tensions. Researchers caution that while public frustration over unemployment and failing public service is genuine, there is little evidence to support claims that migrants are the primary cause of South Africa's economic and social challenges. Instead, they argue that long-standing governance failures remains the country's most significant obstacle.
South Africa bathi nje kuphela abantu bokufika kabahambi. Akuliwe nomuntu nakho nje khona manje nihambe yonke indawo lena nahlule izitolo nahlule emizini yabantu nahlule abantu bemile benisupporta benijabulela la anikaze nishaye umuntu angithi amaphoyisa bekhona bonile uma kukhulunywa ngento peaceful kukhulunywa ngento enje.
Now, let's head to Senegal. Senegal will hold a national referendum on a controversial constitutional reform after the National Assembly approved a bill to redefine the balance of power between the presidency and parliament amid opposition protests and political tensions. Lawmakers passed the bill on Monday by a large majority despite an opposition boycott, heated debate inside parliament, and clashes outside the National Assembly. The proposed amendment seeks to strengthen the powers of Parliament and the Prime Minister while reducing the authority of the President. Supporters say the reform is intended to create a more balanced distribution of power among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government. The bill was introduced by the ruling Passive Party, which holds about 130 of the National Assembly's 165 seats. The party remains the dominant political force despite recent tensions between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and former Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. President Faye dismissed Sonko as Prime Minister in May, after which Sonko was elected Speaker of the National Assembly. Following the bill's approval, Justice Minister Moussa Sarr announced that President Faye had decided to submit the constitutional amendment to a national referendum, allowing Senegalese voters to determine whether the proposed reform should take effect. The constitutional changes have drawn strong criticism from opposition parties and civil society groups who argue they could alter the country's political balance in ways that weaken the presidency. Proceedings in Parliament were disrupted after an opposition legislature refused to leave the podium following the rejection of a motion to postpone the vote. Security personnel later removed the lawmaker from the chamber, prompting nearly all opposition members to walk out in protest. Now, outside the National Assembly, dozens of protesters, many affiliated with former President Macky Sall's Alliance for the Republic, attempted to approach the Parliament building but were dispersed by security forces using tear gas. Some demonstrators threw stones at police, leading to several arrests. The planned referendum is expected to deepen political debate over the future of Senegal's governance as the country weighs one of its most significant constitutional reforms in recent years. Now let's see what's trending across the globe. Overwhelmed after deadly earthquakes, World Health Organization warns Venezuela's healthcare system is under severe pressure following the twin earthquakes that struck the country last week, damaging hospitals, disrupting medical services, and increasing the risk of disease outbreaks, the World Health Organization has warned. The back-to-back earthquakes, measuring 7.2 and 7.5 in magnitude, have killed more than 1,700 people, injured over 5,000, and destroyed or damaged hundreds of buildings, worsening the country's humanitarian situation. According to the World Health Organization, at least 3 health facilities have been critically damaged, while 6 others have sustained partial damage or are operating with limited capacity. An assessment of 21 health facilities found that although most remain open, they are struggling to cope with the growing demand for medical care. Health officials reported overcrowded hospitals, disrupted patient services, and an increasing backlog of surgical cases as emergency teams continue to treat survivors. The agency also expressed concern over staffing shortages, particularly in maternity care. Several specialist healthcare workers in the hard-hit coastal state of La Gaura remain missing, creating significant gaps in obstetric services. Now, thousands of people displaced by the earthquakes are now living in temporary shelters, raising fears of disease outbreaks. The World Health Organization warned that crowded living conditions combined with relatively low vaccination coverage could increase the spread of diseases such as yellow fever and dengue fever. Relief efforts are continuing as health authorities and humanitarian agencies work to restore medical services and address the growing needs of affected communities. Now over to the peace deal. Uncertainty has emerged over effort to secure a permanent peace agreement between the United States and Iran after Qatari officials confirmed that no high-level bilateral talks are scheduled during meetings in Doha this week. Instead, technical-level discussions focusing on regional security, economic issues, and Iran's nuclear program are expected to take place, with the possibility of progressing to senior-level negotiations at a later stage. The development comes despite the arrival in Doha of senior U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, whose visit had fueled expectations of direct high-level diplomacy following recent hostilities between Washington and Tehran. The diplomatic uncertainty follows renewed exchanges of fire over the weekend that lasted the June 17th interim agreement between the two countries. The 14-point accord granted both sides 60 days to negotiate a permanent ceasefire after a month of conflict triggered by U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran in February. The war has disrupted global energy markets, threatened maritime security in the Gulf, and claimed thousands of lives, most of them in Iran and Lebanon. Iran has indicated that discussions with Qatar will continue on implementing the interim agreement, including the release of frozen Iranian assets. However, Tehran maintains that no direct meetings with U.S. officials have been scheduled in the coming days. The White House had earlier stated that senior U.S. officials would hold high-level meetings in Doha while technical negotiations continued alongside them. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the diplomatic process, global oil prices have declined in recent days as markets responded positively to the relative easing of tensions compared with the height of the war. Meanwhile, security concerns remain high around the Strait of Hormuz, a vital global energy corridor through which roughly one-fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas supplies pass. Maritime traffic through the waterway was severely disrupted after the war began, and Iran has since sought greater control over navigation alongside neighboring Oman. The United States has accused Iran of attacking commercial vessels in the strait in recent days, prompting retaliatory strikes on Iranian military facilities. Iran has denied wrongdoing and responded with missile and drone attacks targeting U.S. military installations in Kuwait and Bahrain, with both sides accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. Now, the war has also increased inflationary pressures worldwide and created political challenges for U.S. President Donald Trump ahead of congressional midterm elections later this year. Now, in Iran, security tensions remain elevated after 2 members of the Revolutionary Guards were killed in an armed attack in the country's west. The broader regional peace process also remains uncertain, while the U.S.-Iran interim agreement includes efforts to end hostilities between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah movement in Lebanon. Political leaders in Lebanon have expressed reservations about a separate U.S.-brokered framework with Israel, raising concerns that negotiations could stall rather than deliver a lasting settlement. Well, with that, we've come to the end of Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. But before we go, a recap of the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. In tonight's Undaunted, we saw nursing student allegedly stabbed to death in Kumba, boyfriend in police custody. Motorcyclist killed after crashing into parked truck in Nkambe. Heavy rains in Bamenda bringing down power poles, deepening concerns over aging infrastructure. Also tonight, we saw midnight fire got key administrative block at Bamenda Regional Hospital. And on the African scene, growing xenophobia fuels anti-immigrant protests across South Africa. And in the rest of the news across the globe, Venezuela's health system overwhelmed after deadly earthquakes, World Health Organization warns. Well, and that is all on Undaunted tonight, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted newsroom, we say thank you for joining. We leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.